Packing tape. The tape ripped again. Shit, mumbled Jimmy under his breath, but it was still loud enough for Darlene to hear. Explain to me one more time why we're doing this, he commanded. Darlene sighed quietly. She didn't want to talk about it again. She was tired and cranky, and her whole body ached, and her stomach rumbled, feeling less than satisfied from the cereal bar she had wolfed down nearly 3 hours ago. Besides, Jimmy knew why. Darlene ignored Jimmy's question while simultaneously handing him the scissors. He took them gently, his frustration passing quickly. He smiled at Darlene, his usual apology. The packing continued, each boxing up the contents of their lives together, mixed with the marginal contents of their lives apart from one another. Last week, their nearly 30 years together felt like it had passed in the blink of an eye. But these last few days, both Darlene and Jimmy realized that 30 years was indeed an accumulation of a lifetime. They would have both preferred to pack everything. Further, they would have preferred to tell the movers to pack everything. This experience would be so much easier if they could simply pack a few suitcases and leave, as if taking vacation. Two things hindered this plan, however. They couldn't take everything, and movers could not decide on the what. Instead, Jimmy and Darlene agreed that they would pack together, another bonding experience on their journey through the phases of life. At least, this is what they told themselves. It'll be fun, but there was nothing fun about it, and agreeing to the arrangement was the last thing in recent days that they had actually agreed upon. Early into the packing process, the couples realized that they were opposites in valuing their stuff. Jimmy accumulated large quantities of tools and gadgets over the decades. Darlene didn't think he would need much, if any, of these items in their new home. Jimmy disagreed. Conversely, Darlene accumulated large quantities of serving dishes and books. Jimmy didn't think she would need much, if any, of these items in their new home. Darlene disagreed. But there wasn't room enough in the new house for everything. There just wasn't. Packing up contents of a 2-story, 2-car garage home with a basement to be transferred into a 1-story, 1-car garage home on a slab felt like emotional torture. Each tool and dish held a value both in form and function. To carelessly discard them felt like tossing out chapters of their book of life. Moreover, deciding on just which one of the multiple tools and dishes to take gave rise to emotions not quite on par with Sophie and her devastating choice. Jimmy tried adding another piece of packing tape to his latest box. Again, the tape ripped. This time, Jimmy did not hold his volume and let out his frustration with a resounding, insisting, "Shit!" Jimmy's use of the word shit in less than 5 minutes' time was a completely accurate assessment of the current situation. It was just misdirected at the tape. It also redirected Darlene to consider an equally expressive response to Jimmy's original question. We are moving because you fell down the stairs, because you cannot, and more importantly, should not, go up and downstairs anymore. Because you get disoriented and confused and will get more and more disoriented and confused as time goes on. Because the doctor strongly suggested that we move into a house with a more appropriate layout, without stairs, safer, and finally, we're moving and spending days and days packing up and discarding all of our cherished belongings because I love you and I'm worried about you and I want to make things easier for you and for me when either physically or emotionally you're gone. Instead, Darlene remained silent and ignored Jimmy's latest profanity. She felt better just the same. She had learned over the years together that sometimes what was left unspoken often spoke greater volumes. Neither one of them wanted to move. At least they didn't want to move right now. After all, Darlene was only 56, and she still had at least another few years of teaching left in her. But as a professor of statistics, she couldn't ignore the odds. Jimmy, however, was 17 years her senior. He didn't like being a man in his 70s, and so he insisted on using their age gap to define the years of accumulated experience. Jimmy had been an engineer for most of his working life. In high school, he found part-time work in a factory to help his family with the household bills. Jimmy worked hard. It took him 10 years to earn his college degree. He was rewarded with an engineering position within the company. Ironically, Jimmy helped engineer industrial spiral staircases. Now, operating the packing tape dispenser seemed to confuse him. Jimmy always preferred order and routine in his life. This was what drew Darlene to him as a life partner. As a young statistician rooted in the math of things, Darlene understood the importance of stability and predictability. A further irony. Darlene let her mind drift into the new house. It was in a gated community. It felt safe. There were positives, advantages. Yes, she considered an opportunity for reestablishing order, or at least less chaos. Amendment, less physical chaos. The new house was smaller, but it was also new. There wouldn't be the need for repairs and upkeep like there was now. The yard was small, but there was still a place for a garden. They both liked to garden. That didn't need to change. They could still garden. Instead of 4 raised beds, one each of tomatoes, legumes, squashes, and root vegetables, they could enjoy one raised bed with 1 or 2 of each of the plants. Darlene thought of her vegetable serving platters and considered that she might not really need to take all 6 of them. 2 would do. Darlene spoke out loud this time. Hope hung in the air. Make sure you pack both spades and both pairs of our gardening gloves. She ended the request with a smile, her usual way of asking. Sure, Jimmy replied in an automated tone. Jimmy rolled out yet another length of packing tape across the box. It ripped. Shit, he said again. Darlene looked over at Jimmy. Her love-filled heart felt as heavy as the last box she packed, and even though it wasn't a question, Darlene responded in a soft yet strong voice. Yes, she spoke. It certainly is.